Let's start by asking who was Charles Babbage in three short sentences. And as soon as we receive a response, all four agents currently are working on their appropriate tasks. You can see which tasks they're assigned to from these system messages. For example, this one is analyzing pros and cons, and this one is identifying any unresolved issues, which currently there are not. Now let's ask why didn't he build the analytical engine, which was pretty much the first draft of a computer, like a prototype idea. And now we get summaries and key takeaways from the entire conversation. The beautiful part is that you can actually change the system message. I can say here, translate to Spanish, and let's ask another question. They say, who did he work with? Who was Ada Lovelace? I don't know if it's going to be mentioned. And as you can see, this translate to Spanish is now translating our conversation into Spanish, the entirety of it. Apparently, he did interact with Michael Faraday. So this is very cool and nice. You can actually delete any one of the agents. So this is like a multi-agent conversation analysis. You can actually add up to four on each side. There we go. These actually automatically get populated with predetermined system messages, which you can change from the code if you so wanted, but you can also change them from your web UI as well. For example, on the left side, we can have translation tasks to German, French, Spanish, and Old English. And on the right, we can have pros and cons, key arguments, brief overview, and the fourth one is empty. You can say return keywords as Python list. I'm just going to go ahead and say hi. And as you can see, this is the German translation, French, and here is the Old English. And we also have a Python list over here along with all the rest. Like I said, you can delete these. This is like a great little project I built with Next.js, and I learned quite a lot about it. We're going to do a code review, but you will be able to download the entirety of the project from my Patreon. This will be available for Architect Plus members. To better understand how this works, I highly recommend you watch this project at my 1000x Masterclass, this Project 9 video, in which I go into detail on how actually I built this project, not this particular project, but how I'm building these projects without writing a single line of code. Actually, I wrote very few lines of code for this because I was using the next Vercel AI SDK along with Zero and to generate actually UI components, which I modified later using Cursor AI capabilities. So in my 1000x the masterclass, I go into detail. Do check it out. Link will be in the description. But this consists of a total of 11 projects that were built entirely using AI tools, just to transfer my what I've learned when building with AI, especially using Cursor IDE. Let's begin reviewing the code, but when you actually, let's allow me to explain to you, if you do download this code, how you are supposed to run it. All you need to do is enter the multi-chat folder when you unzip it. And then once you're there, all you have to do is npm run dev, type this command, npm run dev, and everything is included in this project, all the necessary dependencies, and then it will give you a URL, localhost 3000, and it'll take a few seconds to start, but once it starts, you will actually be able to interact with the chat. Right now, just in about 10 seconds, now we have a whole new chat interface. Let's go ahead and review the code. Now, this is really useful because we are making multiple API calls, up to 8 at times, to a single API endpoint called the route. And this actually handles our regular chat along with the sentiment analysis I said, but actually it's whatever task you give it. Okay, I actually have changed this to the proper naming. So everything here works with Next.js 14, Vercel AI SDK, and the components were created by Vercel v0, as I have mentioned. Vercel v0 is a place where you can create React components just from natural natural language prompts. And once you have that, it'll also give you a command to install it. Once a layout has been generated, you can actually view the code for it, and you can actually copy this command and run it within your folder, within your project, Next.js 14 project, and it will install all the components. So let's begin by going over page.tsx, which is our main page. Before I continue, if you are not very familiar with Next.js, just remember that when you run the command to build a Next.js project, which is this command right here, it's npm create next, not pnpm, but npm create next dash app, that latest. Once you run this, it'll actually ask for an app name, but you can enter it immediately. So once you run this command, it'll actually create all these files and folders for you. So this is kind of like the engine of the project. So don't get caught up in the fact that it's actually complex looking. The only things we care right now is the app folder where we build our pages and our APIs, and also the components if you're going to build any components. That's about it. So the rest of the stuff is kind of like the cylinders. When you're buying a new car, you may worry how powerful it is. And Next.js is powerful, but sometimes, I mean, most likely you don't want to look into the cylinders themselves. You can definitely look around and learn that packages like .json is pretty much like requirements.txt from Python. But essentially, Next.js works with folder-based routing. That's why we created under app folder and API folder. And under that, we created a chat folder, use chat, which is from Vercel AI SDK, automatically uses this chat endpoint. And under it, we could define a route. These names are default. You have to name it route.tsx. And here we actually receive our request and handle our calls to OpenAI. We are making two calls, one for the main chat and other for the agent tasks. That's about it. And in our page.tsx, actually, we are importing a component from multi-chat file. I would like to take a moment to talk about the benefits of becoming a patron. As some of you may know, in the last year and a half, I've spent 3,000 hours, over 300 projects as a patron. You will have access to all the code files so you can get inspiration and iterate quickly. Another benefit is that you'll have access to all my courses. And my most recent and most proud one, the 1000x MasterClass, teaching what I've learned on how to code fast and efficiently. Also the Streamlit course and the Fast API course. In my Patreon, I also have tiers in which you can connect with me one-on-one. Check those out as well. Look into our component. We have component folder and then the UI folder. All of these were installed by V0, but I actually went ahead and separated it using cursor. For example, these icons that we see on the page, which we are not actually using, I separated them into their own file. And then multichat.tsx is what we are actually importing and using. And our main page is pretty much our main page. And this multichat.tsx actually imports the conversation summary, which is actually a single component which deals with all the tasks that you want to throw at any agent. And all the avatar images and stuff is imported from the UI components, which were automatically installed by V0. So if you look at our multichat.tsx, which is a component we import and display on our index page, we see that we are importing use chat from AI SDK, which automatically handles the requests that we're going to make to the model. And since this is async in nature, we can actually reuse it. And we reuse it for making parallel calls as well. And we are going to use state from React to set the states of several things. Use state is very similar to, if you're familiar with Streamlit, the session state, since React components get re-rendered often. If you want to keep track of variables, you just end up using use state. And now we are importing all those components from the UI, like the avatar button and input right here. And then we are importing the conversation summary, which we are going to take a look at. And then we define a list of default system messages, such as summarize the main points of the conversation, identify key takeaways. These are going to be the system messages, which we are going to pass on to each conversation summary component. As you can see, currently we have 5, but if you were to add 1, then all these 5 components is going to automatically retrieve its system message based on this list. And then we have a function called multi-chat, which is going to use chat, messages input, and handle submit. So these are and is loading. These are automatically provided to you by the Vercel's AI SDK. Messages is what is being returned from the API. Input is what we want to send to API. And handle input change actually is the set function for the input use state. If you're familiar with use state, meaning input is a variable and handle input change is a function that sets the input. So we don't directly assign to input. Input actually is just string. If you control click on it, but we apply to it the content we want to, which we want to send to the API by using handle input change function, which we're going to see. And handle submit actually just makes the call to the API, and is loading, actually, if you hover over it, is a Boolean which tells us whether the API request is in progress or not. Why are we doing this? Why are we using is loading? Because since our application is streaming, as you can see, we are streaming token by token. We don't want to trigger the API with each token, but we want to wait until the entire API request has been done, which then set is loading to false. And then we can actually make our call to the agent endpoints so that they can perform their task. And then we create two use states, one for left summaries and one for right summaries. And their states are set to true and true, because this is going to allow us to remove and add them back in using these buttons on our UI, like the plus button will add a component, and this X actually will remove it. Continuing, handle remove summary is going to take in an index number, check if it's left or right, and then it's going to render it either visible or not. And handle for the remove summary function, and the handle add summary is going to try to do the same thing, but to actually add the component to our UI. And then we are returning some elements here with some Tailwind styling. As you can see, the left summaries map is going to actually take in a visible and index parameters and actually call the conversation summary component with a few parameters, such as like an index key, messages list, which is going to be the messages list of our current conversation. Message is loading equates to the is loading of our main chat. That's why we were importing it right here. So we can determine if our original chat call has been completed or not. We pass a default system message, the one that is picked automatically via the index. And then on remove, we pass a handle remove summary. So as you can see, this, because it uses map, handles up to 4 components. For example, when we remove these and add them back in, these are handled by this map situation right here. And also, of course, by calling the remove and handle add summary. And then the left summary is filter Boolean. This actually the next one, which actually has the button plus icon, actually handles the add summary. So these two, map and filter, actually handle the removing and adding of the conversation summary components, which is each one of our agents. And then we pass a bunch of parameters to it. The rest of the stuff is just creating a div for messages. As we have said, we are going to map over messages which we receive automatically from use chat. So our use chat is going to take in an input, which we set by using handle input change. And then we're going to submit it. And then this is going to arrive in our API endpoint, the chat route. And then we're going to receive it as a request. And this first part is to handle actual agent calls, but the next part is much more simpler. We receive the messages, and then we actually just log it, and then simply receive the messages, log it, and pass it to the stream text, which is provided by Vercel AI SDK. Choose your OpenAI model and just pass in the messages. That's it. And result.toAI stream response is going to return streaming responses as messages. And on the multi-chat window, multi-chat component, we're going to receive those messages because we are defining it, extracting it out of use chat right here on line 23. And it's just going to map over it and check for the user and assistant roles and place the avatars and the messages themselves by using this. And we are printing the contents, so the roles and the contents, and the appropriate styling is applied to them right here in this few lines of code. And then next we have a form, which is going to actually, this form is going to have a button. And when this button is clicked, it's going to trigger handle submit, which is going to trigger an API call. And here on change, we use the handle input change, which actually updates our input based on whatever has been entered into the text area, and the value then is automatically set by input. So handle input change sets input, and now using that input, we actually assign the value of that text area. And when we click or press enter, then we are triggering handle submit, which handles submit of the use chat, which is going to send this input to our API, and we're going to receive it right here as messages. And now we're just going to make a call to API and return them, and then the .map is going to place them onto the page for us. Now, if you scroll down a little bit more, we have the right summaries.map, which does the exact same thing as left summaries. Again, it has an index, a message list, if the original chat is loading or not, and then the same thing exactly. And then it has a button to add new components for some conversation summary or to remove them. Now let's take a look at conversation summary. Here we are actually. This is the part this is the component that's going to handle our agents API calls. Here we define an interface. These are just some types that we are defining. Message list, for example, is going to be in this format. Messages loading is a Boolean, so this is kind of like defining a Pydantic type schema. But here is the main part. The conversation summary takes in a message list, which is the message list of our main chat. Message is loading is whether our main chat has been finished doing its API call or not. We will actually receive a system message from our main page, and then we are going to receive on remove as well. And we are again getting the messages input, handle input change, and handle submit, and is loading from the use chat. And we are also actually passing along with the use chat body of messages list. So instead of making this as being sent through with the API call, which to our backend, we are actually going to send it as a body. So we can actually differentiate the messages list and properly structure our messages. So just to quickly go over it here, we are going to receive a messages list, and we are going to actually grab the components grab the roles and the contents, and then just kind of replace them in a nicer fashion, like the role and the content. And then we're going to assign it to messages to analyze. And when we are making the call for each agent, we're going to have a system message plus the content, and we're going to say, here's the conversation, and we're going to pass in messages to analyze. So that's why we are actually passing the messages list from our original chat into as a body, so we can actually receive it in our route. As you can see, when we receive the request, we check if body includes a messages list. Then we make the agent. If it is so, then we make the agent call. Otherwise, we make our regular chat call. So this way, a single route in our chat API route can handle both the regular ongoing conversation plus the agent. And we are using a use state for a summary, which we're going to set so we can display it on the. We can append, so we can display it to the user in the custom system message and set that. And we have a use effect. So use effect is kind of like an action you want to perform. Use effect triggers every time the page reloads or when you hook it onto an event. Here in this case, we are hooking it to message is loading. If you remember, message is loading is passed to us from the is loading parameter. Is loading parameter of our original main chat. We pass that. So we know when this is actually false, then we know that our main chat has finished its API call. Therefore, we have a full set of messages, a round of messages, meaning the user had sent a message and assistant has fully responded. So when that happens and the status of this Boolean changes, then we actually make a use effect call, and we make sure that we are currently not performing an API call. And then we do a check that the message list has more than 0. This messages list is the list of messages from our main chat. And we simply log it. And then we define a synthetic event. The reason why we're going to do this is because, normally speaking, use chat is designed to deal with forms. If we go back to our main page and if you remember when we had the form, it had a button on submit, it was calling handle submit, and on change, it was handling whenever the user is typing into the text area, and it's automatically updating the input. So we need to kind of simulate that. That's why here we are calling it a synthetic event, and we assign the target of it as the system message, because this is the message that we want to send to the backend. The JSON.stringify the system role message as the content. Your task is to perform an ongoing analysis on a conversation. Here's the task you are given. So this is a general system message that we are specifying for all agents. Your task is to perform an ongoing analysis on a conversation. And here is the task you're given is the custom system message, which we are passing from the list of default system messages. But of course, also a custom, very much so custom message if you wanted to modify it right here and change it, such as when we ask for translations. So then we assign this target, and then we, as you say, we are simulating it as a React change event of an HTML text area element. And then we just simply log that. And then we say that the handle input change, instead of handling a text area input, is actually going to handle a synthetic event of the type of text area element. I hope I was able to make this clear, because this was quite complicated in my mind. It took me a while to understand it. So since handle input change from use chat deals with forms and text areas, we are simulating it right here essentially with this synthetic event. And that's why we are simulating it as a HTML text area element. And then we make that the target of the handle input change. And then we just make our handle submit, which is also of the type of a form element, because we are again simulating. And this whole thing triggers when actually our main chat is loading status has changed, when it is true. I'm sorry, when it has changed. And then we are using another use effect that looks at the messages and continually sets the summary of the content, because we are simply just going to display it on this elements that we are returning. Rest of the stuff is that we have an input with the custom system message that we have been provided, but you can also, there's a placeholder called enter a summary prompt too, but it's auto-populated. Essentially, this is what handles the input right here that we see in each of the components. So each one of these little components that we see on the left and right is being handled by this chat summary prompts. And essentially that's it. And there's a on remove with the X button, with the X element, with the X icon, I should say, which actually removes the 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 component. That's why we're passing the on remove function in when we are creating them. On remove is on remove parameter points to the handle remove summary function here, which we have defined. We are passing it here as on remove and saying that when the X is clicked, then that function is going to trigger and remove that component. So this is pretty much it. I really hope I did a good job explaining it, but we have an app folder which has a API and chat folder consecutively. Under app, there's API. Under API, there's chat. Because of the fact that use chat actually automatically by default calls that API, but you can actually change that. See, you can see it looks like this. You can actually change this. For example, just to show you, if you wanted to create another endpoint like analysis or something, I would create a folder, and under it, I would create route.tsx. Okay. And this analysis has to be under API. So now we have two routes, one for chat, which is default for use chat from Vercel AI SDK, and analysis. And if I wanted to change that, I can say analysis. So it'll try to call that if I had the logic for it, just to show you. So setting up your API endpoints and calling them is very easy. Other than that, we have page.tsx in the app folder, which is our index main page. And we are actually running the multi-chat component, which is our main page, which in turn imports the conversation summary component. And then we define everything about the conversation agent component, I should say, or the summary, whatever. is defined right here. We just simply import it and use it in our code right here, and we pass all the necessary parameters to it. And the rest of the stuff, like I said, was generated, like the UI, by V0. As a matter of fact, multichat.tsx was generated by V0. Let me actually talk about that real quick. I'm going to go to my history and actually find it. So this was how I generated it. You can actually see my prompt to V0 was a dark mode chat app with pastel colors and subtle animations on four corners of the chat app. There are four components which summarize the conversation in four different ways. And I did use the fast and free version, and it looked like this. So it offered me three alternatives. This was one, and then this was another one, and then this was another one. I actually picked this first one and wrote a message right here. And this is the message I wrote. The chat is the main window in the middle. The other components are on the opposing sides, which then gave me this. And as you can see, this doesn't have any prompt because you can actually select components. You can edit with this right here, little arrow. You can actually select components and then delete those elements or update them. So I must have selected this main component and wrote this prompt. And after that, I actually probably clicked on this and deleted the element since it doesn't have a prompt associated with it. And then this one, as you can see, this part was removed. And in the next iteration, I say add the main chat here. Make sure it auto scrolls the bottom when there are too many messages. And then it created actually some dummy conversation as well. And then this was pretty much good enough for me. Then I went to the code and I ran this code snippet that it gives me, and I installed it. And then I separated the icons, and then I separated the conversation summary by continuously prompting the GPT-4 and Opus models in Cursor. That's why if you wanted to dive deeper into how I do that, I go into detail on Project 9 of 1000x Dev Masterclass. I highly recommend it. As a matter of fact, I just recently ran a poll with my patrons asking them if they find the 1000x Masterclass useful. So far, there's only been 17 votes, but almost everybody said they found it useful or they haven't tried it yet. So, yeah, to give it a try, link will be in the description. And the code files for this entire Next.js app will be available at my Patreon. Link for that will be in the description too. Thank you for watching. Do let me know what you think of this. I would like to take a moment to talk about the benefits of becoming a patron. As some of you may know, in the last year and a half, I've spent 3,000 hours, over 300 projects as a patron. You will have access to all the code files so you can get inspiration and iterate quickly. Another benefit is that you'll have access to all my courses. And my most recent and most proud one, the 1000x Masterclass, teaching what I've learned on how to code fast and efficiently. Also the Streamlit course and the Fast API course. In my Patreon, I also have tiers in which you can connect with me one-on-one. Check those out as well.